It was in the early spring of 1887 when Sherlock Holmes and I found ourselves in a condition of unuse. You will rest. For my companion, whose restless mind was forever craving intellectual exercise. Way, kind freaks on. Repose was rarely a desirable state. Yet, the circumstances which had brought us to this condition were, to my knowledge, without precedent. For Holmes had been ill, seriously ill. It was the first and only time I had seen my great friend weakened by the strain of his own remarkable exertions. The great detective had just returned from a formidable case in Lyon, where his investigations into a French conspiracy had taxed his mind and body to their uttermost. The newspapers of both London and Paris had celebrated his victory, but the cost had been extreme. He had fallen into a state of collapse from overwork. The doctors in Harley Street insisted that complete rest was necessary, and thus I resolved to take Holmes into the quietude of the English countryside, away from fog, telegrams, and the incessant demands of Baker Street. You must not imagine, Holmes, that I will allow you to return to your chemical experiments or even to a single case until you have fully recovered. Your pulse was most alarming, but 3 days ago.
My dear Watson, your solicitude does you credit, but I assure you, my mind is already chafing under this inactivity. It is not in my nature to remain idle while the world continues to conceal its riddles.
Yes, but you are not invincible, Holmes. Even the sharpest blade must not be kept forever at the grindstone, else it snaps under its own tension.
A most poetic metaphor, my dear fellow. Yet I confess it irks me to think that I, who pride myself on control, have been mastered by so simple a thing as fatigue.
Thus it was that we accepted the kind invitation of my old army comrade, Colonel Hayter, to stay a fortnight at his country house in the pleasant district of Reigate in Surrey. The colonel's cheerful company and rustic surroundings, I hoped, would give Holmes the rest he so sorely needed. Our first days were passed in quietude. Holmes walked with me among the budding hedgerows, though he leaned heavily upon his cane and his once piercing grey eyes had not yet recovered their familiar brightness. Still, I could see signs of improvement. His appetite returned, and with it, his sharp humor. But I knew well that the smallest spark of a mystery would be enough to stir his faculties into dangerous activity once more. That spark was not long in coming. On the morning of our third day, Colonel Hayter came down from the village with the local newspaper in his hand. His military stride was brisk, and I saw the colonel's ruddy face was lit with suppressed excitement.
Holmes, Watson, you two have chosen an eventful week to visit me. We have had a burglary in the district, and no small affair either. The paper says it was at the house of the Actons, one of the oldest families in the county.
A burglary, you say? And what did these enterprising rogues carry away, Colonel? Jewelry, plate, or some easily convertible property?
That is the odd part of it. They took very little of real value. A few odd pieces of plate, a couple of old coins, and a volume from the library. And mind you, they had full run of the place for hours. It seems altogether senseless.
Senseless? No, Colonel, never say senseless. There is always a sense, if only we have wit enough to perceive it. When a crime appears purposeless, it is then most assuredly designed.
But Holmes, you are under strict orders to rest. Surely you would not dream of involving yourself in this local affair?
My dear Watson, to observe and to deduce is for me no more a strain than for you it is to breathe. If I may be permitted to examine the scene, I promise to confine myself to no more exertion than is absolutely necessary.
Well said, Holmes. In truth, the Actons would welcome your counsel. They are greatly disturbed, for their house has stood inviolate these generations past. I can arrange for us to visit this very afternoon. Should you feel up to it?
I should be delighted, Colonel. It would be positively therapeutic.
I exchanged a glance with the colonel, but there was no use arguing further. When Holmes's curiosity was aroused, it was as impossible to check as the tide of the Thames. That afternoon, we set out for Acton Manor, a fine old house surrounded by oaks and fields, its ivy-clad walls speaking of centuries of English stability. The master of the house, Mr. of the house, Acton himself, received us with a countenance of mingled indignation and anxiety. He was a tall, gaunt man, with aquiline features and a mane of white hair that lent him the air of an ancient Roman senator.
Gentlemen, You may imagine my feelings when I discovered that villains had broken into my ancestral home. Nothing is safe nowadays, and yet the whole thing baffles me. Why should they take such trifles and leave the silver untouched?
It is precisely such bafflement, sir, which renders the matter so worthy of inquiry. Would you be so good as to recount the precise order of events as you know them?
Gladly. It was discovered yesterday morning. My butler, upon entering the library, found drawers ransacked and one of my rare volumes missing. A case of ore and coins was gone also. Yet in the dining room, the sideboard with the silver stood as untouched as if no thief had been near it. We can find no trace of how they entered, save a window with a broken catch.
And the missing volume, pray, what was its nature?
A book of sermons, sir, of the last century, of little commercial value, though to me it was of some interest.
Curious, most curious. And the coins, were they rare or easily distinguished?
Some were Roman, others early English. By no means treasures of the first rank, but a collection I had formed over many years.
I should be obliged to view the library, if I may.
Mr. Acton led us into a large, oak-paneled chamber, the shelves of which groaned beneath their weight of learning. Holmes's eye darted from case to case, taking in every detail. The disorder of the drawers, the footprints upon the carpet, the window latch so clumsily forced. Too late, he knelt with difficulty, examining the mark with his magnifying lens, while I hovered anxiously, fearing the strain upon his health.
The window was forced from within, not without. Observe the splinters. Someone wished to simulate an entrance rather than to effect one. This is a staged burglary, gentlemen.
Sage Holmes, do you mean to say the thieves sought to create the appearance of robbery while concealing another purpose?
Exactly so, Watson. And mark the dust upon these shelves. The book removed was not snatched hastily, but selected with deliberation. Yet why these particular items?
That is what bewilders me. If the thief had been a scholar, he might covet the volume. If a collector, he might fancy the coins. But why the combination? And why leave the more valuable property?
Because, sir, the objects themselves were not the true object of the intrusion. They were mere tokens intended to mask a deeper motive. Rest assured, the significance will emerge in time.
I could see the gleam in Holmes's eye, and I knew the hunt was afoot once more, and guessed. But little did I suspect that before the week was out, we would be embroiled not in a petty burglary, but in a crime of violence that shook the quiet countryside of Reigate to its core. That evening, back at Colonel Hayter's, we had scarcely finished our supper when a servant entered, pale and agitated.
Beg pardon, sir, but there has been foul play at the Cunningham's place. Mr. Cunningham's coachman was found dead upon the road, and it is said he was shot. The constable has been sent for, and there is great commotion.
Good heavens! The Cunninghams, you say? They are but 2 miles hence. This is a grave affair indeed.
Holmes, you must not.
On the contrary, Watson, I must. A burglary, followed by a murder within 3 days, both within the same rural district. The coincidence is too striking. Colonel, will you accompany us at once?
And so it was that, though I had hoped for peace, I found myself once more at Holmes's side, drawn into a web of intrigue that would test even his genius to the utmost. Thus began in earnest the adventure of the Reigate Squire. Night had fallen as we set out, the moon riding high over the Surrey lanes, lending a cold silver hue to the hedgerows and meadows. Our carriage rattled swiftly along the narrow road, the horses driven at a pace suited more for urgency than comfort. Holmes sat opposite me, his long, thin figure swathed in his cloak, his head leaning back in apparent languor, yet I could see the glitter of his eyes in the dim light. He was not resting, he was already at work, weaving threads of conjecture into the beginnings of a net. Holmes, I beg you, remember the weakness of your health. This is no time to indulge your insatiable hunger for mysteries. You have not the strength for it.
My dear Watson, rest assured that my body may falter, but my mind remains indomitable. To suppress its natural activity would be to court greater illness than any physician could remedy.
Holmes is right in his way, Watson. Best let the fellow exercise his brain. And truth be told, I'd wager our local constables would be glad of sharper counsel than they own tonight.
Duplass soon became within sight of the Cunningham estate, a stately house set back behind tall elms. Here, its windows lit by the glow of lanterns within, a small crowd had gathered in the lane, for such an event was unheard of in this peaceful district. Chan, the constable, a portly man with side whiskers and a look of harried authority, saluted as Colonel Hayter leapt down.
Colonel, gentlemen, it is a sorry business. The coachman, William Kilwan, was found shot not an hour past. His body lies there by the roadside. I was just about to take statements from Mr. Cunningham and his son, who heard the disturbance.
Permit me to examine the scene before anything is disturbed further. Constable, time is the essence in such matters.
Certainly, Mr. Holmes. Though, mind you, it seems plain enough. The poor fellow stumbled upon a thief in the act and was shot for his pains.
Plain. My dear sir, nothing is plain until it has been proved.
We followed Holmes to the roadside, Asher, where the lifeless form of William Kirwan lay stretched upon the grass. The moonlight revealed his rugged features, now fixed in the stillness of death. Tears. His hand was clenched about a scrap of crumpled paper. Holmes knelt, his sharp eyes missing no detail.
Watson, your medical eye, if you please.
The wound is to the chest, slightly to the left. The bullet entered at close range. Death would have been nearly instantaneous. Yet note the powder burns, Holmes. This was fired at a distance of scarcely 3 feet.
Excellent, Watson. Your observations grow ever more precise. Now, what do you make of this scrap of paper clutched in his hand?
Holmes carefully unfolded the fragment. It bore writing in ink, the lower half of a torn sheet. His words, visible read, "How? At 11:15. It is of the utmost importance. As you value your life." The remainder was jaggedly severed.
A fragment of a note, evidently torn in the struggle. Observe, gentlemen, the poor fellow must have seized it from his assailant, or perhaps it was thrust into his hand. Its significance will be profound.
A threatening note, you think? Then murder was no accident of burglary but deliberate intent.
Most assuredly deliberate. Note, too, the position of the body. He lies upon his back, but the soil here shows prints leading away in 2 directions. We must follow them before they are trampled by curious feet.
Holmes, leaning heavily on his stick, moved with surprising agility along the verge. By lantern light, he traced the impressions, one a heavy boot, the other lighter and narrower.
2 persons, both fleeing, yet one set is deeper and irregular. That man was running at speed. Oh, so was Azu. The other is more measured, a curious partnership.
Could they have been the Cunningham servants, perhaps pursuing the culprit?
That remains to be seen. Let us speak with the household at once.
Within the Cunningham home, we were received by Mr. Cunningham, a stout gentleman of florid complexion, and his son Alec, a handsome but somewhat dissipated-looking young man. Both were agitated, though their manners were polite.
Gentlemen, a most dreadful occurrence. Paul K1, faithful fellow these many years. I was in my room when I heard the report of a gun. My son here hushed down, and we discovered the body. We know not who could have done such a villainous act.
Yes, I was at the window when I heard it. I ran out, but all I saw was darkness and shadows fleeing across the lawn. It was too late to render aid.
Indeed. And at what hour was this?
Just before midnight. We had retired early, but the noise brought us to the window.
And neither of you observed the face or figure of the fleeing men.
No, sir, it was but a glimpse, and I would not swear even to their number.
Curious, for the tracks outside indicate 2 distinct sets of feet. And yet you, who were first upon the scene, can give no particulars.
I regret that it is so.
Holmes, do not rest too hard. These gentlemen are clearly shaken.
Forgive me, Watson. Yet truth must be pressed, or it will never reveal itself. Tell me, Mr. Cunningham, do you recognize this fragment of a note found in the deceased's grasp? Now.
Holmes extended the torn paper. Mr. studied the torn paper. Cunningham adjusted his spectacles, his ruddy face paling slightly.
No, sir, I cannot say that I do. It is strange, very strange indeed.
And I have never seen it either.
Very well. Then I must beg leave to examine the premises more closely in the morning light. For tonight, I advise the constable to guard the grounds and permit no tampering with the scene.
It shall be done, Mr. Holmes.
And so we returned to Colonel Hayter's house, the chill of the night heavy upon us. And try. Holmes remained silent most of the way, his brows drawn together in thought. I feared the strain was too great for his convalescent frame, yet I knew better than to interrupt the working of that extraordinary mind. The following morning dawned bright, the fields glistening with dew. Holmes seemed somewhat refreshed, though a pallor still lingered about his features. After breakfast, he requested that we accompany him once more to the Cunningham estate.
Gentlemen, there are points here which do not accord. The staged burglary at the Actons, followed by this brutal murder within 2 days, and both within a mile's distance. This cannot be mere coincidence. There is a connecting thread, and I mean to grasp it.
Do you believe the same hand is behind both crimes, Holmes? Holmes,
I do, Watson. The burglary was but a prelude, an opening move in a larger design. What design? I shall soon determine.
at the Cunninghams, Holmes asked to see the room from which Alec claimed to have witnessed the shadows fleeing. We were conducted upstairs, where he examined the window, the sill, and the garden below with minute care.
Note, Watson, the view from here. The lane is obscured by trees. It is impossible that Mr. Alec could have observed figures upon the road, as he claimed.
Then he spoke falsely. Holmes?
Precisely. The question is, why?
Holmes then requested to see the library, where he lingered long upon the writing desk. At last, with a quiet exclamation, he drew from beneath a pile of papers a torn scrap of letterhead.
Ha! As I suspected, the counterpart to our fragment. Observe, gentlemen, the same hand, the same ink, yet curiously, the lower portion is missing. Precisely the piece we found in Kirwan's grasp. This, constable, is the key to the riddle.
Bless me, Mr. Holmes, you mean the note came from this very house?
Unquestionably, and that fact alters the complexion of the entire affair.
I saw then a light of fierce triumph kindle in Holmes's weary eyes. First, he was still weak in body, but his mind blazed with that inexhaustible energy which had so often astonished me. I knew that we were on the brink of discovery, though the precise nature of the crime remained clouded. That evening, Holmes confided to me alone by the fire.
Watson, the Cunninghams are not mere witnesses. They are actors in this drama. One of them penned that note, summoning Kirwan to his death. The difficulty lies in proving which, and in unmasking the motive behind so dark a deed.
But Holmes, surely it is monstrous to suggest father and son alike complicit in murder.
Monstrous, perhaps, but no less true for that. Trust me, the final act is at hand. By tomorrow, the matter shall be resolved. Get thee.
Thus spoke my friend, and I, though torn between concern for his health and awe at his certainty, could only wait upon the morrow, for I knew that, where Holmes had planted his foot, no mystery could withstand him for long. The following morning broke fair and clear, the Surrey countryside basking in sunlight, though the tranquillity of nature stood in stark contrast to the agitation of men's hearts. Holmes, pale yet keen-eyed, declared his intention of making one final visit to the Cunninghams. Holmes, are you certain you are strong enough for such exertions? Twice already you have taxed yourself dangerously.
Strength, Watson, comes not alone from the body, but from the mind's resolve. I have set my hand to this task, and I shall see it through. Besides, it is elementary now. The case stands but 1 degree short of absolute proof.
Then by heaven, Holmes, let us give you every assistance. A neighborhood lies in suspense, and nothing would restore its quiet more than the discovery of the villain.
With that, we set out once more. The constable, having been instructed by Holmes the night before, met us at the door, his expression betraying both eagerness and confusion.
Mr. Holmes, I have done as you asked. The household has been kept under observation, though I cannot fathom what you expect to find within. The gentlemen appear respectable enough.
Respectability is often the mask of crime, Constable, but let us not speak prematurely. The truth, I think, shall presently unmask itself.
We were ushered into the drawing room, where Mr. Cunningham and his son Alec awaited us. They both bore an air of irritation, thinly veiled by courtesy. The elder gentleman's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his cravat, while the younger's dark eyes flickered with restless energy.
Mr. Holmes, I confess I do not understand this continued intrusion into our affairs. Surely the constable has sufficient authority to pursue the matter without bringing private persons into our household. Dot.
Sir, you will forgive my persistence, but the death of an honest servant demands more than perfunctory inquiry. I believe the solution lies within these very walls.
Indeed? Then perhaps you will enlighten us as to how, for thus far your insinuations have proved nothing.
Patience, Mr. Alec, all in good time. For the present, I beg both of you to accompany me to the library, where a small experiment will, I trust, dispel all doubts.
The air was tense as we moved to the oak-panelled library. Holmes directed that a writing desk be cleared, upon which he placed both the torn fragment we had found in Cohen's hand and the upper portion recovered from the desk the day before.
Gentlemen, observe, these two fragments form a perfect whole. One portion was found in the grasp of the murdered man, the other hidden here in your own room. What inference follows?
Why, merely that some villain must have stolen the sheet and left the remainder. It proves nothing against us.
On the contrary, it proves everything. The note was written from this house, penned in a hand which cannot be mistaken. It held, one of you summoned Kiban to his death. The torn paper is your signature upon the deed.
Holmes, surely.
Hush, Watson. The proof lies in the handwriting. Constable, I require samples of writing from both gentlemen. A brief note will suffice.
This is outrageous. You have no right to demand such indignities.
Alec, let us comply. Better to silence these suspicions than to prolong them.
Reluctantly, father and son each took pen and scrawled a few lines at Holmes's request. He compared them swiftly with the incriminating note.
It is as I thought. The hand is identical, every loop, every stroke. Mr. Alec Cunningham, you are the author of this summons, and therefore the prime mover in the crime.
You dare! This is a monstrous accusation.
With sudden violence, Alec leapt forward, seizing Holmes by the throat. We done. The detective, weakened by illness, reeled under the assault. Yeah! Instantly, I sprang to his aid, grappling with the young man, while Colonel Hayter and the constable rushed in to secure him. In the struggle, a drawer was flung open, and from it fell a revolver, gleaming in the light.
By heavens, a firearm! Loaded too! This may well be the very weapon that ended Kirwan's life.
Alec, what have you done?
Silence, father. Will you betray me now?
The elder Cunningham sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. It was evident that his complicity, whether by deed or by silence, could no longer be concealed. Holmes, recovering his breath, motioned for calm.
Restrain him, constable. Violence will avail him nothing. The truth is clear, and denial futile. The note lured Kirwan to a midnight rendezvous, where he was met not with parley, but with death.
Holmes, why shall Alec Cunningham murder his father's coachman? What motive could he possibly have?
The motive, Watson, is ever the final key. We shall find it in due course. For now, the handwriting, the weapon, and the attempt upon my own person are sufficient to secure him.
Alec, seeing himself undone, ceased his struggles and stood sullen, his eyes burning with hatred. Flushed and panting, bound his hands securely.
We'll have him lodged in the gaol this very night. And what of the father, Mr. Holmes? Was he part of this foul business too?
That remains to be determined. His silence, at least, speaks of guilty knowledge, though whether of the act itself or of some preceding matter, who shall soon discover.
We left the library in solemn procession, Alec guarded closely, his father tottering beside him. A broken man. Outside, the villagers had gathered in hushed knots, whispering among themselves as the constable led his prisoner away.
Holmes, you have rendered us a service beyond measure. Never has our quiet county seen such villainy, nor such swift justice.
Justice, Colonel, is but begun. We must yet lay bare the motive, lest doubt linger in any mind. I shall require a few hours of quiet reflection to arrange the facts, Bed.
That evening at Colonel Hatter's house, Holmes reclined in an armchair, his face drawn but his eyes glittering with inward fire. I, who knew the signs well, saw that his brain was in full cry, hunting down the last elusive clue. Holmes, you frighten me. You are pale as death. This strain is more than your constitution can bear.
Fear not, Watson. I am near the end. A few more links, and the chain will be complete. Then I shall rest, content in the knowledge that justice has been served.
For hours he lay silent, his gaze fixed upon the ceiling, his long fingers steepled before him. At last he stirred, a faint smile upon his lips.
Watson, the matter is as clear as noonday. The motive was blackmail. The burglary at the Actons was but a diversion, contrived to obscure the more deadly business at hand. Kirwan had discovered something perilous to the Cunninghams. For his silence they sought to bargain, but when he proved obdurate, they resolved upon murder.
And the father, was he as guilty as the son?
He shared in the knowledge, though I think the actual shot was Alec's. The elder Cunningham's role was passive, though none the less culpable in law. Their downfall was inevitable the moment they left that torn paper within reach of the victim's grasp. A single scrap of evidence may suffice to topple the stoutest edifice of crime.
I could not but marvel at the unerring chain of reasoning by which Holmes had drawn truth from the smallest clues, the forced window, the missing book, the fragment of a note. To me they had seen but scattered trifles. To him they were the alphabet of crime, spelling out guilt as plainly as printed words. Thus ended the most dramatic phase of the adventure of the Reigate Squire, though its full conclusion still lay ahead. Coblaw. For the law must take its course, and the motive be proved beyond all cavil. Yet for me, as I watched Holmes sink at last into an exhausted sleep, there was but one thought uppermost, that his genius, though perilous to his health, was once again triumphant. The following morning dawned dull and misty, the Surrey fields draped in a veil of pale vapour, as though nature herself sought to shroud the memory of the night's violence. Within Colonel Hayter's breakfast room, however, the atmosphere was anything but obscure. Holmes, pale yet composed, sat upright at the table, his long fingers resting lightly upon a sheaf of notes he had drafted in his meticulous hand. Holmes, you look ghastly. You scarcely slept, and you refuse sustenance. If this is your notion of convalescence, it will be the death of you.
My dear Watson, rest assured I have but one task remaining, and when that is done, I shall submit myself entirely to your regimen. For now truth calls, and I must answer.
Holmes, the whole county rings with astonishment. The arrest of young Alec Cunningham has set every tongue wagging. Yet still the people ask, what could drive a gentleman of means to so desperate a crime?
Precisely, Colonel. Motive is the one indispensable element. Without it, suspicion may be aroused, but conviction will falter. It is therefore imperative we lay bare the very root of this tragedy.
At that moment, the constable entered, saluting respectfully.
Good morning, gentlemen. I have secured Alec Cunningham in the gale, and his father is under watch. Both are sullen and silent. I had hoped you, Mr. Holmes, might be able to throw light on the darker corners of the case.
You shall have it, constable. Gather round, for I would make the matter plain to all present, lest doubts persist.
We drew close, and Holmes, with that peculiar blend of calm precision and suppressed energy which so marked him, began to unfold the tale.
The first clue, gentlemen, lay not in the murder itself, but in the apparently senseless burglary at the Actons. Why should thieves take a few coins and a worthless book, leaving behind treasures of greater value? The answer is simple, because the burglary was never real. It was contrived, and its purpose was to destroy certain documents which, if preserved, would have proved ruinous to the Cunninghams.
Documents, Holmes, then the Book of Sermons.
Contained within its leaves, Watson, was a paper of legal importance. no doubt relating to some mortgage or debt owed by the Cunninghams to the Actons. It was in their interest that this record vanish. By staging a burglary and abstracting the book, they sought to obliterate the evidence of their liability. The stolen coins were but a garnish, intended to lend verisimilitude to the ruse.
By George, Holmes, that explains their nervousness whenever the Actons were named in conversation. But how does this connect to the death of poor Kirwan?
Ah, Colonel, here lies the crux. Kirwan was a faithful servant, but no fool. He observed, perhaps by chance, the Cunninghams in their plot. Out, he may even have stumbled upon the stolen book. Realizing his knowledge gave him power, he sought to use it, whether for gain or from some misguided sense of justice. Thus came the fatal note. Alec Cunningham lured him to the lane, promising reward or negotiation, but instead met him with a revolver. The torn paper in Kirwan's grasp is the silent witness to the treachery of his master.
So it was blackmail then? The coachman sought to profit from what he knew?
In all probability, yes. It is a common enough motive, though no less tragic for that. Yet observe, the very attempt at concealment proved their undoing. Had Alec destroyed the note entirely, suspicion might never have touched him. But Kirwan, in the struggle, tore it, and the fragment became the thread which, once grasped, unravelled the whole fabric.
Holmes, your reasoning is dazzling, but I confess it leaves me humbled. To my eye, the burglary was a petty crime, and the murder but an act of sudden violence. I never should have linked the two.
That, my dear Watson, is precisely why you are invaluable to me. You see the surface as others see it, unclouded by theory. It is only by contrasting your natural perceptions with my deductions that the truth stands revealed.
And what of the father? Was old Cunningham privy to the deed?
His complicity is beyond question, though his hand may never have touched the weapon. He shared the motive, and he shared the silence. In law, he is as guilty as the son. The jury will decide the degree of his punishment. Cause on!
There was a silence as Holmes concluded, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Ah, Biggs, each of us felt the weight of the revelation and the pity of it that men of birth and station should stoop to such infamy, dragging their ancient name through the mire of crime.
Mr. Holmes, I cannot thank you enough. Without your insight, we might have muddled on for weeks and justice never been served.
Nonsense, Constable. You had but to look more closely at what lay before you. Remember this. When a crime appears senseless, it is then most assuredly contrived. 'Twas no coincidence, for it is the ruse of the guilty.
That afternoon, Holmes and I walked once more along the quiet lanes, and higher mace. His step was slow, for weakness still clung to him, but his mind, I could see, was invigorated by the chase's conclusion. Holmes, now that the matter's laid to rest, you must truly give yourself to rest as well. The strain has been prodigious, and I fear the cost.
Perhaps you are right, Watson. Yet, you know, for me to rest is not to lie idle, but to turn my thoughts to some harmless abstraction. A chemical experiment, a monograph on cigar ash. These will serve better than apathy.
Seba said, then let me at least be the guardian of your activity. Shall see that your occupation is mild enough not to endanger you further.
Ever my watchdog, Watson, you are, I think, the one fixed point in a changing age. Without you, I might indeed burn out like a candle consumed by its own flame.
His words touched me more deeply than I can express, for it was rare indeed for Holmes to let slip a glimpse of the regard he bore for me. I resolved that, whatever the future might hold, I should not fail in my duty to stand beside him, friend, physician, and chronicler of his genius. In the days that followed, news spread throughout Surrey of the Cunningham's arrest. The Actons, though scandalized by the revelation of their neighbour's guilt, expressed satisfaction that justice had prevailed. The people of the district, long accustomed to rustic peace, spoke of little else for weeks. Yet amidst the gossip, none forgot to honour the name of Sherlock Holmes, the stranger whose penetrating eye had stripped away the veils of deception and laid bare the truth. And for myself, I could only marvel anew at the strange destiny which had bound my life to his. This man of steel and fire, whose triumphs shone like beacons in the murk of human folly, yet whose own flesh was frail as any mortal's. Thus it was that the adventure of the Reigate Squire drew toward its close. But even then, as I watched my friend in the quiet of the country, I knew that for Sherlock Holmes, peace was never more than a brief interlude. The world was full of riddles, and he their sworn adversary. In the week that followed, the quiet county of Surrey seemed transformed. The lanes where once only the lark's song or the rumble of farm carts was heard now rang with the talk of villagers and farmers, each repeating with embellishment the tale of the Cunningham's downfall. The gaol at Reigate held both father and son, while the magistrates prepared for the trial that promised to be the most sensational the district had ever witnessed. Holmes, though visibly weakened by the strain of his efforts, could not resist observing the progress of events. He declared that to see justice carried to its completion was as restorative to him as any draught or tonic I might prescribe. Thus it was that we attended the opening of the proceedings, seated together in the crowded court, Colonel Hayter at our side. Holmes, if this crowd is any indication, the whole county has turned out. I scarce believe so many faces could be crammed within one hall.
It is ever thus, Watson. Watson, the world may be indifferent to virtue, but it will press eagerly to the spectacle of vice unmasked. Still, the lesson may prove salutary. Let them see how crime, however cunning, is brought low by truth.
Bar proceedings began with solemn formality. The charges of murder and conspiracy were read aloud. Alec Cunningham stood defiant, his handsome features now marred by sullenness and an air of reckless bravado. His father, by contrast, appeared utterly broken. His once ruddy face had grown grey, his frame stooped, as though the weight of disgrace had already crushed him. The crown presented its evidence. The torn note found in Kirwan's hand, the matching fragment disclosed in the library, the revolver identified as belonging to Alec, and, above all, the testimony of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes.
Mr. Holmes, you are celebrated for your skill in matters of detection. Will you inform the court in what manner you arrived at your conclusions?
With pleasure, sir. The facts are simple when viewed in their true relation. A burglary was staged at the Acton estate, its purpose being to obliterate legal documents disadvantageous to the Cunninghams. The ruse was clumsily contrived, as the choice of stolen articles was absurd. The truth of this stratagem came to the notice of William Kirwan, the deceased coachman, who sought to use his knowledge as a lever. He was lured by a written note to a midnight interview, where he was shot at close range. The fragment of that note clutched in his hand proved to be the one thread which, once seized, unravelled the whole design. The handwriting upon it is incontestably that of Alec Cunningham, and the revolver found in his possession is the weapon which inflicted the mortal wound.
And what of the father? Was he equally guilty?
His complicity lay in knowledge and concealment. He permitted the crime to be plotted under his roof and afterwards sought to shield the perpetrator. In the eye of the law, he stands as guilty as the sun.
Holmes's calm, measured tones carried conviction to all who heard them. Done. The jury whispered among themselves, their faces stern. The defense made feeble protestations, speaking of lack of motive, of circumstantial evidence, but the chain was too strong. Piece by piece, the crown wove the net tighter, until resistance was vain. I watched Alec closely. His defiance ebbed as witness after witness confirmed the damning facts. At last he sat slumped, his lips compressed, his eyes avoiding every gaze. His father, meanwhile, seemed scarcely conscious of the proceedings, his hands trembling upon the rail before him, his head bowed as though already sentenced. When the jury returned with their verdict, guilty of murder and conspiracy, the murmur that swept the court was like the sound of the sea upon a shingle beach. The judge, in solemn tones, pronounced sentence of death upon Alec Cunningham and penal servitude for life upon his father in consideration of his age and lesser activity. A hush fell. The two men were led away, and so closed the final act of that melancholy drama.
Holmes, you have done what no other man could have achieved. The county will long remember this day.
I ask no remembrance, Colonel, save that justice has been vindicated. It is enough for me that the innocent are protected and the guilty unmasked.
After the trial, Holmes and I returned with Colonel Hayter to his estate. There, in the quiet of the library, we reflected upon all that had passed. Holmes reclined upon the sofa, visibly spent, yet his eyes gleamed with that peculiar brightness which always attended his triumphs. Holmes, though I marvel at your success, I cannot help but fear the cost to you. Your frame is not fashioned to endure such continued strain.
Perhaps not, Watson. Yet consider, what is a man if not the sum of his faculties? To let them rust unused were a waste more deadly than any fatigue. If my powers have brought evil men to justice, then I count the cost well paid.
Still, you must learn moderation, else you will burn yourself out before your time.
Ah, moderation, my dear fellow, is a virtue I have never mastered. Yet with you at my side, perhaps I may be persuaded to attempt it. You are, after all, my physician as well as my friend.
Todd Jade, his words, spoken with a rare warmth, touched me deeply. It was not often that Holmes allowed sentiment to break through the steel of his intellect, but when he did, I treasured it as proof of the human heart that beat beneath his cold exterior. In the days that followed, we remained yet a little while in Reigate, allowing Holmes time to recover his strength. We walked together through the lanes, where the hedgerows were now rich with blossoms, and the birds sang as if to celebrate the restoration of peace. The villagers doffed their caps to us, and more than once I heard the name of Holmes uttered with reverence, as though he was some knight errant come to champion them against evil. Yet Holmes himself dismissed all such talk with a wave of the hand.
Fame is a fleeting bauble, Watson. Today they cheer, tomorrow they forget. What matters is not the applause of men, but the satisfaction of the intellect in grappling with the eternal riddle. For me, each case is but another step along an endless path.
And yet, Holmes, you give men something more than satisfaction of the intellect. You give them justice, security, and hope. That is no small gift.
Perhaps you are right, old friend, but enough of philosophy. Let us speak of lighter things. I have an idea for a monograph upon the varieties of handwriting, suggested by our Reigate case. That shall be my next labor, and I promise it will demand nothing more strenuous than pen and ink.
And so, with a faint smile, he turned again to his endless pursuit of knowledge. For me, I felt a deep contentment that he was spared for a while longer from the dangers of his calling. Yet I knew well that such peace could not endure. Sooner or later, some telegram would arrive, some desperate knock would sound at the door of Baker Street, and once more the great brain would be summoned into action. But for that brief interlude in the Surrey countryside, I had the comfort of seeing Sherlock Holmes at rest, his genius vindicated, his health slowly restored, and his friendship shining with that rare warmth which made me proud above all things to call myself his companion and his biographer. Thus ends the adventure of the Reigate Squire.